Hi, welcome to Parent Tips episode 3. We've been having a fantastic time talking about caregivers and nannies. Last week, we talked about interviewing a nanny, and I hope you got to listen to that episode and glean a few lessons from it. This week, as I promised, we're going to be talking about legal matters. Stay tuned. Now, gone are the days when we violated the rights of our domestic workers. Those stories are long gone. We now have KUDEHA. Now, KUDEHA is the Kenya Union of Domestic Hotels, Educational Institutions, Hospitals, and Allied Workers. And their role is to protect domestic workers. Nannies and caregivers fall under that category of domestic workers. And so KUDEHA advocates that you give your domestic worker, your nanny or your caregiver, a contract. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to be talking about the importance of a contract, how a contract can protect you from being sued or from legal action, and the kind of things to include in a contract when you're employing a nanny. Now, issuing a contract to your nanny is in your best interests and is therefore very important. Well, without a contract, it becomes easy to disprove terms of engagement, salary that was agreed on, and other things that revolve around the employment. You can easily fall prey to accusations of non-payment or discrimination. Now, a contract should not be issued more than 3 months after engagement. And the couple of things we're going to talk about next are the things you need to put in place in a contract and some of the actions you need to take before issuing a contract. And so once you employ a nanny, you can consider the first 90 days as a probationary period. So one of the most important and primary actions many people prefer to take is to request the nanny to go for a medical exam. Now, this is your right because this is someone coming into your home, is going to be in close proximity with you and your children, is going to be preparing some of your meals. And so if you feel it's important to take her for a medical checkup, then it is your right to do so. The one thing I would advise is that this medical exam should be done before the contract is signed. Because once the contract is signed and you take your nanny for a medical checkup and issues arise that you do not agree with, if you terminate her, you can be sued for discrimination. So if it's important to you to do a medical exam, again, I repeat, please do it before issuing the contract. You can choose to do it during the probationary period. You can choose to do it as part of the interview process. And at that point, if you're not comfortable with some of the health challenges that the nanny may have, you can release her. But once she has signed the contract, if you release her based on medical grounds, you are very suable. Some of the other things that I feel are important to include in a contract, first and foremost, as we mentioned last week, is the nanny's job role and description, and try to be very specific that this is the output you expect from her. Another thing is NHIF. I once had a case where my nanny fell very ill under my care and in my home, and she did not have an HIF. And so as an employer, I felt it would be very unfair to send her home and not assist her. And so I had to take up the costs, her medical costs. She needed surgery. We had to take care of that, and we had to send her off in a dignified manner and actually get someone to hold for her before she came back. So it's very important to ensure that you deduct an HIF or you ask your nanny to deduct. Nowadays, you can deduct from your phone and send your 500 shillings directly via M-Pesa. In case of any accidents or incidents or illnesses, you reduce chances of incurring costs that you did not intend to incur, and at least the NHIF can take care of that. Something else to include in the contract, obviously, is remuneration. How much have you agreed to pay her, and that should be well stipulated in the contract. And further to being stipulated in the contract, you must find a way to account for that payment every month. In my case, I pay via M-Pesa, and that's my record, so that I have evidence that I've made the payment. Another thing to include are working hours. It's important to consider recommended legal working hours, consider off days, consider annual leave days, which is recommended as 21 leave days. And those are paid leave days. You can choose to take those leave days during the holidays, like I do. You can choose for her to take those leave days as a block once a year. It's up to you and it's up to your agreement. Something else you need to consider to put in the contract is sick leave where necessary and the kinds of arrangements that come around that. Kudeha recommends that when a nanny is sick, you give not less than 7 days sick leave on full pay and another 7 days sick leave on half pay. So you need to consider that. Another thing to consider is maternity leave. I have a friend who was sued by her nanny because she terminated her contract because she got pregnant. Yeah, things have changed. So it's important to consider that too. It's important also to request for a copy of your nanny's ID. And for some people who have come across, they actually request for a certificate of good conduct. If that is what you prefer, you can decide to advance her the money to get a certificate, and then you can deduct that from her later. And those are the basic things I consider when drawing up a contract for a nanny. You know, there's lots of cases out there about employees who have sued employers because of things that we overlook. And ignorance is no defense. So please consider that. I hope you've benefited a lot from this conversation. I'll ask you to please interact with us, comment, subscribe on our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram, and like our Facebook page. Throw in emails to ask us questions, give us your thoughts, and we'll really appreciate that because that's where our content comes from. So have a wonderful, wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week on Wednesday as we wrap up this topic on nannies and caregivers. Cheers.